Another season comes to a close, and it is time to do my traditional top 5 best and top 5 worst drivers of 2024. Now, I'm recording both of the videos back to back today, so they'll be releasing right after each other in consecutive days. Obviously, today I'm doing my top 5 best, and then tomorrow I'll be doing my top 5 worst, so let's get into it. And now to begin my top 5, I'm going to be doing exactly what I did last year and give the 5th spot on my list to a midfield driver, someone who isn't in McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari or Red Bull, someone who I think deserves recognition in the midfield because especially when you're doing top 5s, which is obviously most of the time going to be the top drivers, I feel like, yeah, some of the midfield drivers perhaps don't get the love that they deserve. And so yes, this 5th spot is going to go to a midfield driver, and undoubtedly in my opinion, the best driver in the midfield this season has been Nico Hulkenberg. I mean, I've got his stats right here. I think he has had an outstanding season. He has scored points 13 times this season, and he's also finished 11th, so just outside of the points, 7 times on top of that. So it just shows you how fine the margins are. I mean, you know, if you kind of turn those kind of 11th places into more points, I mean, he could have been one of the most consistent drivers in general this season. Just forget about the midfield. So there's also a few caveats kind of with his season as well that you have to consider, in the sense that he's obviously leaving the team at the end of the year, and that announcement came quite early in the season. And so unlike with, you know, to an extent kind of Lewis and especially Ocon at Alpine, he was, you know, he kind of kept it very consistent. Him and the team kept working very well together. Again, that definitely wasn't the case for someone like Esteban at Alpine. And just in general, I feel like Nico has had the classic Nico Hulkenberg season, but just to another level. He hasn't crashed that much, he's been consistent. The strange part is, he hasn't even been kind of the most controversial or headline-grabbing driver at Haas. I feel like K-Mag with his, you know, all those penalties and then, you know, getting disqualified from the race. Obviously, Ollie Behrman coming in for a couple of races as well. Nico Hulkenberg has just been kind of sidelined as, you know, the support act when it comes to making headlines, but he has definitely been the front man when it comes to scoring points, which is what matters in the end. Haas have had an incredible season, and Nico Hulkenberg has spearheaded that incredible season. Now, there was something that absolutely stunned me when I looked at some of the stats, because if you look at his average qualifying position in both 2023 and 2024, in 2023, it was 12.1, and this season, it's 11.7. So, you know, a little bit better, but nothing kind of too crazy, you know, 0.4 difference. If you look at his championship position and the amount of points that he has scored compared to last year he finished 16th in the championship with just 9 points. This year, he is 11th in the championship with 41 points. I mean, that is just absolutely incredible. Now, a large part of that is the fact that finally Haas have a better car on the Sunday. We know that last year, their car was notorious for being very good in qualifying, but absolutely terrible in the races. And I think, again, Nico Hulkenberg was able to deliver on that race pace. He was just as impressive in qualifying, obviously maybe a little bit better, but he delivered on that race pace when it mattered most, that finally, now that he has been given the car. So yeah, I think he has been the outstanding driver in that midfield, and he is my 5th best driver of 2024. And next up, in 4th place, I have got George Russell, who had, I think, more than the stats and more than beating Lewis in kind of, you know, those kind of comparison, you know, counting numbers, and even more than the wins and the pole positions and podiums, this was a really significant and important season for George Russell, because with Lewis leaving, you know, going to Ferrari, and Kimi Antonelli coming in, a driver who George is going to be expected to beat in 2025, it's really important for George to have a season like this where finally he looks like he is ready to challenge for the World Championship, a much more consistent season. Actually, what's quite amazing is that in terms of his average qualifying position, and I think this might shock some of you guys, his average qualifying position was the 3rd highest in 2024, obviously behind Max and Lando, but ahead of drivers like Piastri and Leclerc of all people. So yeah, he has been outstanding on a Saturday. It hasn't quite, I think that's more due to the Mercedes, it hasn't quite then kind of transferred onto the Sunday, but he has still been very, very impressive. Took a few, you know, really good wins, obviously had that disqualification in Spa, which, you know, we can't really count too much because at the end of the day, that's just what happens when your car is illegal. You know, Lewis had the same thing last year, if we remember, in Austin. So it was a really important season because there's a lot of pressure on his shoulders, I think, both this year and also next, because we know that Toto Wolff is going to try to get Max Verstappen. And so George this year, this was a very important foundational year for him to show Mercedes that you don't need Max Verstappen. We don't need Max. I can win the championship. I can beat him. I can be the #1 driver. And again, beating Lewis and kind of having, in my opinion, the best season of his career is the first it's the first building block of him potentially trying to save his seat, because he is going to have a very difficult time with that in 2025. I know Toto is going to be chasing Max, and with the amount of investment that they have in Kimi Antonelli, I don't see, unless Kimi has an absolute howler of a season, George is going to be the one that's going to be under pressure next year. So yeah, this was a very important year. He did a very good job up against, in kind of very difficult circumstances at Mercedes. That car, we know, is just so random from weekend to weekend. Like, yes, it's strong when the conditions are a little bit cooler, but it changes so much from session to session that it's very difficult for both of their drivers to kind of find any consistency. But yeah, I just feel like George, he definitely deserves recognition for a fantastic season. Not just, beating Lewis. We know that, Lewis is obviously leaving the team. He was on a massive kind of low mentally. And George was able to pick up the pieces. He was able to pick up the morale of Mercedes and show them that even though the Lewis era is over, they have got a very bright future. They've got an amazing driver who definitely can win them championships. And it's just a case now of finally giving him the championship car that he thought he was getting when he joined this dominant team in 2022. And next up in third place, I have got Lando Norris. Now, arguably the most talked about driver this season, understandably so. There's been a lot of attention around him, obviously with McLaren winning that Constructors title. The first one, by the way, I clocked, the first McLaren Constructors title in my lifetime. I wasn't alive in 1998, so yeah, that's quite a crazy thing for me to finally see McLaren as Constructors Championships, and Lando has been a massive part of that because, once you actually look at the entire season, he comfortably beat Oscar Piastri. I mean, of course, he was always going to have to beat Oscar. Oscar's only in his second season, but he comfortably beat Oscar, which I think should not go kind of unmentioned. So, Oscar has a lot of hype and potential behind him, but, when you look at their quali head-to-head, 20-4, so you can definitely see where Oscar's weaknesses and Lando's strengths lie. And for all of the kind of negative and critical things that I have said about Lando, which I feel are fair, because to me he is a top driver who should be judged amongst the likes of Leclerc and Hamilton and drivers like that. Amongst those kind of all the criticism that I have had for him, his speed has been phenomenal. That's what keeps me believing that if he just sorts out those kind of little issues that he had, in wheel-to-wheel combat and little things like that, he is undoubtedly a championship-capable driver, and that has been kind of the most impressive thing about him this season. I mean, 8 pole positions, some fantastic performances. I think, even though the pressure was kind of off because obviously the championship was over, he left his best performance for last. I mean, Abu Dhabi, that McLaren was definitely the best car, but it wasn't dominant, and Lando just had a perfect weekend. I mean, pole position, the race, I think he led every single lap. That gives him a fantastic fantastic momentum going into 2025 to potentially challenge for the championship from the very beginning of the season. So yeah, he definitely improved as the year went on because he was learning so much. I don't think it was, the perfect season for him. I'm sure he's going to look back on it quite critically. He showed that he does have the potential to look untouchable in certain weekends, like we saw in Singapore and Zandvoort as well. So yeah, I would say a mixed championship campaign, but definitely a very strong season from Lando Norris. A lot of things to learn. He definitely is a leader at McLaren, but yeah, he's got to make that next step, and unfortunately that next step is to catch a certain Dutchman who is a very, very good driver who we might talk about a little bit later on. So yeah, a mixed season, but undoubtedly a very good one from Lando Norris. We are into the top 2, and in second place it is Charles Leclerc. I mean, what an absolutely phenomenal season he has had. In my opinion, definitely the best one in his career. Just such a well-rounded season, I think both on and off the track as well. And I mean, the fact that he has finished this championship just 18 points behind Lando Norris in third place it's nuts to me. I mean, the fact that it was even a conversation that he might finish second in the Drivers' Championship, especially given that Ferrari's car definitely dipped in the middle of the during the middle portion of the season. They definitely got lost a few times, and the fact that he was able to still just be that consistent driver. And when we talk about consistency, this is an incredible stat. He has finished inside of the top 5 21 times this season. And when you look at the races that are kind of his bad races, so to speak, in Canada and also in Silverstone, there were reasons for that. Reliability in Canada, there was kind of a strange kind of setup situation where he was experimenting with a brand new floor in Silverstone as well, and Ferrari in general just weren't that competitive around Silverstone. So apart from those races where there's a reason why they kind of, weren't very good races. He has been just ultra consistent every single time. Obviously, some of his standout drives, winning Monaco, his home Grand Prix, breaking that Monaco curse. That was a very special weekend, as usual, with a bit of Leclerc magic on the Saturday, which kind of sealed the deal for the Sunday. Of course, winning in Monza, making that one-stop strategy work. Obviously, kind of had nothing to lose. And then even other drives that I think are going to go under the radar, like finishing on the podium in Zandvoort, like that was not a track where Ferrari were that competitive, and yet he still managed to get on the podium. I think that was a really underrated Leclerc drive in 2024, and overall, I really do think that this season, he has gone up a level. He has cut out those mistakes and those crashes that he was making in 22 and, kind of the early part in 23 where I think he crashed in 2 sessions in Miami. He has cut out those crashes. He is no longer, Charles Leclerc, and he's got that speed, he's got that consistency, he's got that mentality. If you put Leclerc in that McLaren and if he has a car even relatively competitive or, compared to the McLaren in 2025, I have absolutely no doubt that he is pushing Max Verstappen all the way for the championship. Leclerc is ready to be a champion. He's been waiting a very long time to get into a championship level car. And so, yeah, it's been a phenomenal season. And I think the best compliment that I can kind of give to Leclerc is he's the complete package. He's ready to win a championship. I think he's good enough to beat Max Verstappen in terms of raw speed, in terms of mentality, will-to-will combat. And now he's cut out the crashes as well. Yeah, Leclerc, his best ever season in 2024. The fact that he was even in the fight to finish second in the championship, that just says it all about how good Leclerc was in 2024. And last up, coming in at number 1, I have got Max Verstappen. Now, what a season he has had. I proclaimed in a recent video that I think 2024 is his best ever championship, even above 2021. I think it's very close because both of those championship campaigns I think were special in different ways. But this year I think has been just phenomenal. And the one thing that I think I am always going to take away from Max Verstappen in 2024 is not necessarily when the car was kind of like really good. Like, for example, the first 5 races, to me, they were kind of meaningless because I saw Max Verstappen dominate an entire season, last year when he had the fastest car. So I didn't expect anything else at the beginning of this season. But the one takeaway I'm going to have is that between Miami and Abu Dhabi, when Red Bull clearly had the second kind of best car over the course of all of those races and clearly a period where McLaren had the best car, he still outscored Lando Norris. He won the championship in the second best car. Now, you can talk about his level of competition and, did McLaren and Lando maximize their package and all of these things, but Max Verstappen being as good as he is the biggest reason why Lando and McLaren didn't maximize their package. You can't, it's very important to not take credit away from what Max has done, because some of the special races and performances that he has produced, obviously Sao Paulo is the one that everyone's going to talk about, but even perhaps some of the lesser known ones, P2 in Silverstone, a weekend where that Red Bull was struggling, a weekend where that Red Bull wasn't even as quick as either the Mercedes or McLaren, and through great driving and really good calls as well, really good timing to switch to the slicks from both Max and also the team, he ends that race in P2. That was just a drive that kind of blew me away, the fact that he just turned up into P2, and even some of the lesser known ones, like Spain, for example. Now, that drive is really special to me because that is the one race where I pinpoint where Lando and McLaren really could have started their championship campaign right there, starting on pole position, winning that race. That is where potentially they could have started their Drivers' Championship hopes. And Max, through his quality, amazing start, getting that overtake done early on George Russell, and then just executing that perfect race. He stopped Lando and McLaren from building any momentum early, and it's just things, races like that when the car wasn't at its best that I think really makes 2024 a standout for Max Verstappen. And again, when it mattered most after Miami, he has won this championship in the second best car, and he has undoubtedly been the best driver of 2024. Well, there you have it. That is my top 5 best drivers of 2024. Let me know your top 5 as always in the comments box below, and a little reason as to why you've got those drivers in those specific places. There is a lot of drivers that I could have given a shout out to, a lot of really good performances over the course of the season, but yes, that is my list. If you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe. Do not forget to check out my top 5 worst drivers in tomorrow's video, and I'll see you in the next one.